Hey there, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to 5149. My name is James Lee. We have just a short segment for you today about what I'm calling the hashtag Trump nude tapes, where he clearly knew the effects, the deadly effects of COVID-19, but chose to convey a very different message to the public. But more importantly, I'm also going to cover what the Democrats and the media reported on at roughly around the same time period, kind of this late January, February, and early March timeframe. And spoiler alert, everybody was downplaying the virus at the time. And then I'm going to wrap up with what this saga reveals about the biggest problem we face today in American politics. First off, if you haven't yet subscribed to 5149, please consider doing so because it makes a big difference in helping a little guy like me go up against the establishment media. Okay, so jumping into the Trump tapes, I'm going to play the key segments and then we'll discuss.
It goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. You know, the touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air. That's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. This is more deadly. This is 5 per... this is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%. So this is deadly stuff. Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you...
Sure, I want you to.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes, sir.
Because I don't want to create a panic.
So yeah, I think I agree with pretty much the overwhelming sentiment that I see coming from the mainstream media or the establishment Democrats. This is absolutely an abdication of duty. However you might feel about Trump's justification, saying that he was just trying to quell the panic or whatnot, he straight up lied to the American public, and this has devastating consequences during a public health crisis. I'm always of the opinion that we should be given the proper information so that we can make up our own minds on what to do. Don't tell us that masks don't work or we don't need them. Just say, hey, we don't know for sure yet, but it probably works at least a little bit, but we're running out of them, so let's save them for the doctors and the hospital workers, and here's how you can make one at home out of your pillowcase or whatever. Something along those lines. So yeah, Trump obviously has done a horrific job handling the pandemic, so I'm not here to make any excuses for him. But I also want to play responses from key Democratic leaders and the media during roughly the same time period in regards to COVID-19.
There's very little threat here. This disease, even if you were to get it, basically acts like a common cold or flu.
We know that there's a concern about tourism traveling all throughout the world, but we think it's very safe to be in Chinatown and hope that others will come.
Excuse our arrogance as New Yorkers. I speak for the mayor also on this one. We think we have the best healthcare system on the planet right here in New York. Amen. So when you're saying what happened in other countries versus what happened here, we don't even think it's going to be as bad as it was in other countries.
There's an important context we need to keep this in, and that is that the flu is more deadly.
We're still learning about the coronavirus. I want to give you some important context. So far, we know of fewer than 24 deaths from coronavirus in the U.S.
I think that the news that people are going to hear over the next few days is that these numbers are going to go up, and that's going to maybe alarm people, and maybe it shouldn't alarm people that much.
So yeah, they're all the same. The Democrats and the media, they all downplay the severity of the virus and really have no moral standing in criticizing Trump because they did exactly the same thing. The question I want to explore is, why did everybody downplay the coronavirus? Well, one reason I can name right off the bat, which isn't talked about too much, probably because it's extremely uncomfortable to say, is classic American arrogance. That's the answer. Just this idea that we're the best and everything is going to be all good, which I kind of get because in general, nothing bad has happened here in a very long time. We've pretty much escaped every war and disease outbreak in the 20th century completely unscathed. No damage from the world wars, no SARS, no Ebola, no Zika, nothing. So the politicians and the media are like, let's roll the dice here because we've always been fine and we're probably going to be fine here. And the reason for rolling the dice, this answer will not shock anybody here, but it's money's corruptive influence on media and politics. It's this perverse obsession with Wall Street and pumping up the stock market. Almost every single establishment politician and media conglomerate has some kind of tie to Wall Street. So the conversation is always about spending money, how do we get people to spend more money, their last dollar, and how we can boost up the stock market. And then completely ignoring serious issues like how take-home pay for the average American has been flat for decades, or how the billionaires are somehow getting wealthier during this pandemic. And that's why they all go out and say, hey, let's not panic, let's come to Chinatown, let's spend your money, go on your vacations, business as usual. Because if we disrupt the flow of money, then we have to face the music and address the skeleton in the closet that we actually only care about our donors on Wall Street. This might be completely cynical for me to say, but I think one of the main reasons why the Democrats pivoted is almost entirely politically motivated, because they realize that the coronavirus is going to hurt Trump's re-election chances. I know the GOP proposed bill is terrible, but the inaction on the Democratic side, I think, is a political calculation, and it's one that will deeply impact people's health and livelihood in a negative way. So the question I'd like to end on today is, where does their allegiance lie? Do they actually care about people like you and me, or do they represent Wall Street, Big Pharma, and the insurance companies, and are simply using us as a conduit to return to the White House? I think it's time for some serious self-reflection here, because the idea that Trump is the only dishonest actor is completely bogus. Sure, he's the president, and he's been very dishonest and selfish, but every one of our elected officials are responsible for this epic disaster. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please take a moment to hit that like button and share this video with your friends if you enjoyed it. Also, please subscribe if you haven't already done so we can take back our media. I'd really, really appreciate it. My name is James Lee. I'll be back next week with more. And as always, thank you so much for your time.